Okay, this afternoon's session is mainly about rulemaking updates. We will start with M.Gerhard and the updates in part 21. Then the updates in the GA world, CS23. Later on, Olivier will give you an update on SEPIAC, which was mentioned before, which is the tool for project management in the future. And we have a last presentation before the coffee break then about the occurrence reporting, so related to continued airworthiness. As said, we have a full agenda, so I would like to ask Michael to start right away with the rulemaking affecting part 21.
Thank you, Markus. Welcome back, and sorry that you again have to listen to me. That's my last presentation for the rest of the workshop promised. So, it basically continues where we stopped this morning. I want to give you an update on the upcoming changes in part 21. We will continue discussing the same opinion. So within that opinion 6/2017 we have proposed other changes other than level of involvement. So I'm going to introduce those to you related to, for example, the new privileges that we propose. I will also show you the timeline that I skipped this morning. So when can we expect this rule proposal to enter into force and when may it become applicable? That is then valid for LOI and all these other changes that I'm going to introduce to you now. And after that, I would like to introduce you briefly some other rulemaking activities ongoing. They are not yet at the phase where we're going to propose rule changes, but they are at a phase where we are going to have the first ideas put on the website in a notice of proposed amendments for you to comment on it, to give us your ideas, your guidance, in which direction to further develop these rules. And towards the end, I have two ongoing rulemaking activities that I want to present to you where we intend to change only the AMC guidance material. And they are basically at a very last phase. I expect both still to be implemented by the end of the year. But first, let's go back to that opinion 7/2016, in which we proposed level of involvement. But as mentioned this morning, this proposal also contains other aspects, non-level of involvement related. The first big change or bigger change is related to the determination of the certification basis. The second change is related to the possibility for new privileges for STCs, major changes and major repairs. The third big change, and that's probably the biggest change in the proposal, is that we correct some inconsistencies in the structure of part 21. And the last one, I will not mention that in detail today, but there are some smaller other issues that we address, things that we have realized during certification projects, comments that we have received from you. So we do have an inventory of proposals for rule changes that whenever we start a rulemaking activity on part 21, that we take on board if it's possible. So starting with a slide that you have seen already, I just wanted to highlight it's not necessarily LOI related, but LOI is an element of that. The certification process will slightly change. The big change is that the cert program has to be broken down in compliance demonstration items, and for them the risk assessment level of involvement has to be made and the level of involvement has to be proposed. Everything that you see in green color here is new. Blue is already existing today in part 21. Everything in green here is new. You'll also see that a practice that most of you already apply today when you submit your application, we will now introduce, or we propose to introduce in part 21, that the application is already complemented with the first draft of the certification program. But most of you are doing that already today. And then the third change that will happen, it's also LOI related, is that when during compliance demonstration you face difficulties, for example during a test, then you have an obligation to inform us about that, even if we are not involved. And this may lead to us revisiting our LOI determination, and maybe we may change our involvement and decide that next time you're going to do that test, we want to be involved. The second change in Part 21 that we have proposed is in relation to the establishment or determination of the certification basis. Today, if you look into Part 21, 21A17, into the basic regulation, Article 20, and the management board decision that we have on product safety, you have slightly different provisions on how the agency should determine the certification basis. And we are correcting that inconsistency and try to combine and put the current practice into the Part 21 text. Today in 21A17, we mention that the baseline for the cert basis is the applicable certification specification, unless otherwise specified by the agency, or you choose to use a later effective amendment, so a newer certification specifications. And then, if there are no appropriate specifications in any of these CSs, we can use special conditions. Article 20, on top of that, also mentions the equivalent safety findings, that's our term, or if you choose the wording of Article 20 of the basic regulation, the equivalent level of safety, as an alternative to the certification specification. But in Part 21 this is not reflected, or at least it's not reflected in 21A17, it's only mentioned in 21A21 when we issue the certificate. So there is some inconsistency. And the new provision, the provision that we propose, you see it on the right-hand side. The number for that in the future will be 21B80. We start again, of course, with the applicable certification specification. We can deviate from that by using a later effective amendment or by accepting alternatives with an equivalent safety finding, or use alternative means of compliance, as long as they are in line with the essential requirements of the basic regulation. And again, as an alternative to that, if there are no suitable specifications, we can use the special conditions. So this should reflect the current practice and combines all the different provisions that we have today in the basic regulation, Part 21, and the management board decision. This is related to the biggest change that we are doing on the inconsistency of the structure. I will mention that in a couple of minutes. The question was, why is that in Section B and not in Section A? So this, I will show you the rationale behind that in 3 to 4 minutes. The next proposal is quite interesting for you, for approved organizations. We will provide the possibility for new privileges. And the wording of Part 21 in the future is a privilege for certain major changes, certain major repairs, and certain STCs. This will go along with a change to the terms of approval of your organization if you apply for that privilege. We may exclude it, and that's part of the guidance material that is currently being discussed, and which you will see in a couple of days in the notice of proposed amendment. We will exclude it for a couple of cases that I've listed here under non-eligible. But the main thing, the concept, the idea behind that is that what you can see on the bottom of the slide in the picture, today you apply for a certain, let's say, a major change, antenna installation. 3 months later, a similar change on another aircraft. You again apply for a major change for an antenna installation. Basically, very similar compliance demonstration, or even the same compliance demonstration, means of compliance, very identical. Today, you have to apply for these major change approvals one by one, or for an STC one by one. What we want to make possible in the future is that when you have a certain history on approved major changes, that you can apply for a privilege. This is the arrow in the middle that you can see. And then we will assess, looking at the past, how you have performed in these already approved major changes. We will assess whether for the future you can demonstrate that major changes or STCs in the future are really similar with the changes that have already been approved in the past, that the compliance demonstration that you're going to use in the future is similar to what you have already done in the past and which has been approved by us, and that your performance in these previous projects has been good. We will assess that, and if you also demonstrate to us that you have sufficiently changed your procedures in a way on how to run these major changes or STCs without agency involvement, then we may grant a privilege by changing the terms of approval. And then as of that moment when you have the privilege, you approve the major change or the STC under the respective rules in Part 21 without any agency involvement. Same as for minor changes where you have or where you may have the privilege for minor changes today. So we extend that to major changes if we have sufficient knowledge and sufficient experience that similar changes from the past have been well done by you and you performed very well on them. And then there is one obligation being introduced in Part 21, which is basically moving from a privilege into an obligation. Today in 21A263 C3, you find a provision which is basically very similar to the wording that you see on the right-hand side, which will then be in 21265H in the future, that the technical content of a certain document is approved under the authority of the DOA and then with reference to your approval number. You all know this provision. In the coming years we received many comments that actually this is not a privilege to put this statement under instruction for continuing airworthiness, for example, but it's actually an obligation. So we have thought about that and we agreed to these comments that we received a couple of times, and we moved this provision from 263 privilege into obligation 265. The idea is to give certain certainty to the users about the approval of that data and information, and basically it's then, as I mentioned, in order to identify that the data and information bear the statement that you can see on the top right side, and for the approval holder it's then an obligation to propose the relevant procedures to be accepted by EASA for the issuance of the affected data and information. That's a slight change. Also, it should not affect you too much in the practice because you're already doing it under 263 privilege today. And coming back to your question why we've moved the provision on the certification basis from 21A17 to 21B18, that's probably in the first weeks after the new Part 21 in force, the biggest change that practically you will face. We had looked into Part 21 today, and also there we received a couple of, or not a couple, quite a number of comments. The idea behind the structure in Part 21, Section A and Section B, as in other implementing rules in other domains in the agency, is that Section A should contain all the rights and obligations of you, of the applicant and approval holder, and Section B, all the rights and obligations of the competent authority. And 21A17, establishment of the certification basis, is a perfect example. It's something which is an obligation to the agency, but it is in Section A. It belongs into Section B. And we have quite a number of these points in Section A which actually address EASA or the national aviation authorities as the competent authority. So we have received a number of comments on this inconsistency in the structure, and we have changed and retrieved from Section A all of those provisions and put them in Section B. I admit that you will not, in the first days, find the provisions that you are used to, that you know, 21A17, you will have first to get used to that new structure, but we will try to make it as easy as possible to provide you with correlation tables, and actually it's not so much. I tried to put it here with support from one colleague on a slide. These provisions in Section A are all affected, and we try to highlight here how that will change. So you see that a couple of provisions change the text. The wordings had to be adapted slightly, but mainly to reflect their new place without change to the contents. And then all the provisions addressing the competent authority will move into Section B. And then there are a couple of new provisions, basically LOI related, which you see here in green color. But that's it. It affects, let's say, 20, 25 provisions. But in order to ease your lives in the days after the new Part 21 will be applicable, we will provide you with a correlation table where you exactly see which provision has moved from Section A to Section B. And then I had promised to you this morning to inform you about the timeline. When can we expect all these changes, level of involvement and these changes that I just mentioned? So we have submitted the proposal to the European Commission in May last year. It has been discussed already twice in the EASA committee, where the member states are represented, and at the moment it's under what we call internal Commission Internal Service, Inter-Service Consultation, Commission Inter-Service Consultation. With that, the Commission is preparing the legislative proposal, and what has to come next is that the legislative proposal is finalized, the rule text, the proposed rule text is finalized and submitted a last time to the member states in the EASA committee. The member states will vote on it, and if hopefully there's a positive vote, the Commission can then prepare the text for adoption. And then after that, before it enters into force, we already know it will take a couple of months still, because the Parliament, the European Parliament, has a right of scrutiny, and the text needs to be translated. So we normally count 6 to 8 months after the finalization of the rule text, after the EASA committee, until the rule can really be finalized for the publication in the official journal. The next time it can be discussed, I don't know if I have a laser pointer here. No. Oh yeah. The next time it can be discussed in the EASA committee, this point here is probably in February, maybe with a written procedure beforehand, but let's say it's February plus 6 to 8 months. That means the entry into force of Part 21 is not realistic before the end of 2018. So we still have more than a year to prepare ourselves, and as I mentioned this morning, we also propose to the European Commission to have a transition period after that of 9 months, which allows you to prepare yourself. And if we count then 9 months on top, we are, let's say, middle 2019, in the mid-2019, second half of 2019, when LOI and all these other changes become applicable. And that's the moment when you do have to apply. Every project starting after that, then there's an obligation to apply LOI. There's a possibility for the new privilege to use the new privilege. So we're still some time away. You still have some time to prepare. So that's the expectation that I do have at the moment. In parallel, this is now going back to LOI, the topic of this morning. In parallel, we are developing the certification, the AMC guidance material, which runs in parallel and where we plan to have the final decision right after entry into force, but still well within the transition period, so that you also have the guidance material available when you prepare for a level of involvement becoming applicable. And this tool that we use for LOI, the certification memorandum, sorry for that, which also runs in parallel, but where we try to transpose the generic information of the certification memo into the AMC and guidance material. We also received one question on Slido: will the certification memo continue to exist after the AMC guidance material has been adopted? Most of that will have been transposed into the AMC guidance material, so there's no need for an additional certification memorandum. We still have to consider the remaining parts, which we will not transpose into the AMC guidance material. As we discussed this morning, we don't want to create something like the change product rule. These examples, we need to see how to keep them alive. At the beginning, they are really, really useful, but I don't think that we are going to transpose them in AMC guidance material. Whether we maintain them in a certification memorandum or somewhere else, we still have to discuss. But eventually, I expect the certification memo to cease to exist. And then we have the advanced application projects in parallel that feed us the development of the guidance material. Also now at this stage, all these lessons learned that supports us in the process. So this was Opinion 6, 2017, sorry, 7, 2016, that way around, on LOI and these other changes. What's coming next is other rulemaking activities that we have in the pipeline, but which are not yet at the stage of proposing a change. The first one, quite an important one, is on the instructions for continued airworthiness. This was done in 2 phases. We had a subtask looking at the certification maintenance requirements, where I think 2 months ago we issued the decision to amend CS25. So this part of the rulemaking activity is done. The more interesting part, the changes to Part 21 on the definition of ICA, on the contents of ICA and the availability of ICA, is ongoing. And here we are right before publishing our notice of proposed amendment, which you will also see in the coming 4 weeks, which we'll put on our website for you to comment on it. And the expectation is that we, in about a year's time, we provide our opinion, our proposal to the European Commission, and then depending again on the process, a year or a bit more than a year later, Part 21 may be changed in respect of instructions for continued airworthiness. The second important ongoing activity is related to safety management system, another rulemaking task, another rulemaking activity. I mentioned it, or I touched it a little bit this morning when I said LOI is the first step towards implementing ICAO Annex 19. This is the second and much bigger step where we have to implement an Annex 19 for production and design organizations, and we're going to do that at the same time for 145 organization. That's one activity. And here we are, we have just started to develop the rule text, the proposed rule text, and you can expect a proposal from us, the notice of proposed amendment, second quarter of next year. Also, this one is a rulemaking activity affecting Part 21 and the continuing airworthiness regulation, parts without Form 1. Here we want to limit the efforts or the use of Form 1 for certain parts that are used in the maintenance process. Here we are at the moment finalizing the proposal. Also here you can expect very soon our proposal for comments on our website, and then a similar timeline approximately in 2019 you can expect these changes into Part 21. A small task Also in the interface between initial and continuing airworthiness is the importing of aircraft from another regulatory system. This does not only mean from non-EU third countries, but can also be aircraft that are imported from a national military system into the EASA system, where we have to align the provisions of Part 21 and Part M. Here, just 2 months or 3 months ago, we have published our NPA on the website. I'm not sure whether the consultation period is still ongoing. So we are at this phase, end of the consultation period, start of reviewing the comments, and we expect to have in about a bit more than a year's time, beginning 2019, our proposal to the European Commission. And the last one that I want to mention on rule changes, upcoming rule changes, is in relation to drones. You may have seen a proposal beginning of this year for what we call the open and specific category, which will create a new implementing regulation for the operation of drones in the open and specific category. For the higher risk activities, which we call the certified category, we will review all the existing implementing rules, including Part 21, and we will see what parts in Part 21 or what elements in Part 21 do we have to change in order to accommodate drones in the certified category in our existing system. And here, this is this third line here. Here you can expect a proposal coming in beginning of 2019. And then my last 2 points. So these were all upcoming or ongoing discussions on changes to Part 21 itself. My last 2 points are on upcoming changes to the AMC and guidance material. We are about to finalize a change to the AMC guidance material related to the change product rule. We are implementing a recommendation from the certification improvement team of the 4 bilateral partners, EU, Canada, Brazil, and the US. Here the text, you will see, if you are familiar with the text, is 98–99% the same as the FAA has implemented last year in their AC. And we use the same rulemaking activity to provide guidance for approved design organizations on the competence of lead flight test engineers in relation to Appendix 12 to Part 21. This one is also at a very later stage. Also in the coming 2 to 3 weeks, I expect that this change to the AMC guidance material is finalized and the decision is being published. And a second activity, also relatively close to the end, is related to the GA roadmap. We also want to introduce in the AMC and guidance material to Part 21 proportionate means of compliance for the lower end of general aviation for production and design organizations. The idea behind is that where at the moment the provisions on design and production organizations are relatively process-oriented. You have to follow certain steps in the process in order to demonstrate compliance with Part 21. We want to be more objective-based and identify what is the expected outcome if you follow these processes, and from there develop the AMC and guidance material for the lower end of GA. We have splitted this into 2 phases. The phase 1 is in an accelerated procedure where we already consulted during summer. We had a workshop organized in Cologne on the 9th of June and received feedback from you. We are finalizing the proposal and it will still be published by the end of the year, the change to the AMC and guidance material. We do not touch Part 21 in this phase 1, but we think that we need to touch also Part 21 in order to also make Part 21 more proportionate for the lower, or for general aviation and the lower end of general aviation in particular. But we want to wait until the basic regulation has been changed, because the basic regulation will provide us additional tools by which we can implement proportionality into Part 21. So what we are going to do next year is we will, when we know more or less the final text of the basic regulation changes, we will launch an advance notice of proposed amendments with some ideas for discussions and seek your feedback of what in your view can be changed in Part 21 to make it more proportionate throughout all of the domains. So you see quite a number of things ongoing. This is just a summary of all the ongoing activities. The timeline is what you can expect to see in January in our rulemaking program 2018-2022. This is at the moment being finalized and submitted to our management board. So these are the most up-to-date timelines that I can provide to you. Of course, if you see certain deliverables, certain opinions coming within 1 or 2 quarters, we will combine them and maybe combine 2 rulemaking tasks and just making 1 opinion, and even for the rule text the same, as far as possible, trying to combine in order not to come up with too many opinions, too many proposals in a short time frame, and to confuse you more with that. So with that I will stop. If you have any questions to that, please don't hesitate. I don't know what Slido has said in the meantime.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not really related to the rulemaking update, but the question that most people are interested in, how is it impacting validations and the discussions with foreign authorities?
Yeah. Good question. On all of these changes on Part 21, we are in constant exchange with the bilateral partners because we need to ensure that through any of these changes that we are implementing here, we do not put at risk the validation of your projects. So we are in close cooperation to see that whatever we change here is accepted by the bilateral partners, and most of these, or a lot of these concepts, also SMS is a good example where we work very close together and develop the ideas, the concept together, and then we go back to our desks and then we adapt it to our regulatory legal framework, because in the end we cannot have 100% identical rules. We have different systems, but we need to maintain aligned. Yes.
Just to add one point here, we have a lot of discussions with the FAA, and they also have the ODA, and the ODA is going the same way, even further. So we are really exchanging views how to implement our respective systems. Part 21 and Part 21 are slightly different, as you know, but the concept, the idea overall is the same. So during the various bilateral discussions, during the various CMT and subgroups, we really make sure that our bilateral partners, first the FAA of course, are fully on top and aware of what we do. So we do not foresee any real problem, because the concept as developed by us and the same similar concept as developed by the FAA, for instance, or Transport Canada, they are very similar. The details sometimes are different, but this will in no way prevent the continuation of the business as usual. And again, overarching explanation, the ODA, the DOA, call it as you like, depending on the authority, it is our system. And under a bilateral, we recognize a system. So the FAA will accept that our DOA, as it develops, remains acceptable to discharge the bilateral obligations, under the assumption that, of course, we keep them informed on what is going on, and vice versa. I have to admit, first time we saw an ODA approval, we were a bit surprised. But it is an FAA approval. As replying to some of the questions we have here, if a DOA at some stage is able to issue an STC, it is an, not FAA, so it is an EASA STC. So it should not be challenged by a bilateral partner. Of course, that's the theory. In practice, we need to make sure that communication takes place at the right level and that the information is properly understood.
One other block of questions was on the publication of a consolidated version of Part 21 and AMC material as soon as possible after the publication in the official journal. And I think that is part of the e-rule project. But Michael, maybe you can say a few more words.
Especially with all these changes where we change from Section A to Section B. There are two levels here. The Commission will have to make the decision, because Part 21 is not our rule, it's the Commission's rule. So from time to time the Commission publishes consolidated versions, but we have no control. We can recommend it to the Commission, but we have no control on when they are going to do that. But after a change like that, I expect that this will also come. It will definitely not be ready 2 weeks after, but eventually a consolidated text will come. For the AMC and guidance material, we will do that. That is no point. But as Markus mentioned, we have a project ongoing which is called e-rules, and if my understanding is correctly, you had discussed it yesterday in many of the site meetings, where we provide you a tool where you can create your own books. You can create your own consolidated version of rules applicable, for example, only to GA or only to authorities, or everything that is interesting for you on safety management system. So you will be able to search through our database and create your own book, how it is interesting for you. And this new tool will make it very easy to create on one click a consolidated version of Part 21, for example, or even Part 21 with integrated AMC and guidance material. So this will be definitely available, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Michael. Due to the time, I would like to go directly to the next presentation. Pasquale Violetti will explain a little bit the rulemaking activities in the CS23 and the amendments, the latest developments for that.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to present the latest status of the AMC to CS23 Amendment 5. The document has not been published yet, so we are going to give some anticipation. Just a few seconds. I'm trying to copy the presentation on my desktop. So anyway, the topic is well known in the GA community, and but a bit of a refreshment about the status is always good. So we have published the CS23 Amendment 5 March this year, but the effectivity date was delayed until August, 15th of August to be precise. Why? We waited for the availability of acceptable means of compliance. The same did FAA in their framework with the FAR 23. They published the FAR 23 Amendment 64 in December, and they put an effectivity date of 31st of August 2017. Neither EASA nor FAA succeeded in having the AMC published by that date. So we are a bit late in this. The reason why we are late is because the consensus standard thought to be used as a means of compliance were not yet ready at that time. And another reason is the harmonization with FAA. So at the moment, currently we have a set of ASTM standards available, but we are reviewing them, and we have identified some gaps, some deviation. When I say we, it's EASA and FAA. So we are comparing our reviews, and we are going to publish an harmonized, let's say, almost harmonized version of AMC. The requirement is harmonized at a high percentage, almost 100%, and we hope to do the same thing with AMC. I'm not the rulemaking guy, but I think that the publication of AMC is planned for a beginning of 2018, so should be this. Yeah, we hope to publish it also before, but FAA is going to publish it early next year, so it's a question, do we want to be first or... So another bit of refreshment about the starting point. We had until August this year, we had 2 certification codes for GA. The VLA Amendment 1, published in March 2009, and the 23 Amendment 4, dated 2015. And you see the applicability. For VLA, it's single engine, 2-seater, it's 750 kilos maximum takeoff weight, and operational day VFR only. And then you have other criteria for applicability of CS23. You have different category, normal, utility, and aerobatic. You have a number of passengers and a maximum takeoff weight for 5 tons and 670 kilos. After that, you have commuter category with up to 19 packs. These kind of barriers are now gone. We have now mixed the 2 certification specifications, VLA and 23, in only one code, and we kept the CS23 nomenclature, so it's CS23 Amendment 5, so it follows the 23 amendment numbering, which has actually, so the content of CS23 is totally changed with respect to the prescriptive requirement that was before. It's now containing only objective requirements, so the safety intent behind the rule. So it's very general. Therefore, it needs to be supplemented by detailed and prescriptive means of compliance. So the content of CS-VLA and CS23, the old one, Amendment 4, have been translated into AMC. We are using different set of AMC. We are going to use the ASTM standards, or let's say, let's be more general, consensus standards, because other kinds of standards, non-ASTM, which meet the criteria to be a consensus standard, can be used and accepted. And then we keep, for convenience, we keep CS-VLA Amendment 1 and CS23 Amendment 4 as means of compliance, because you will see later on, applicants who are using an existing certification basis may find really convenient to see the connection, the link between the new and the old rule. The categories, normal, utility, aerobatics, and commuters are gone. We have now a different categorization. We have one category, it's only normal, but you have different aircraft certification level. The level 1, the levels are based on number of passengers, you may see. So this is the main distinguishing criteria now. We don't talk about weight or about power plant, for example. We have number of passengers. You see the level 1 may recall the VLA. It's from 0 to 1 passengers, and the rest up to the old commuter category. So level 4 is what we could identify as the old commuter category. Then you have performance level based on the speed, and you have then the criteria. We don't have the aerobatic category, but we will have, of course, airplanes that will be certified for aerobatics maneuver, and airplanes that are not intended to be certified for aerobatics. And this will be reflected in the requirement. You don't see the barriers related to power plant and to weight, but they might be present again in the AMC material. So when you go back then into the details of the requirement of the, let's say, of the AMC, you will see that those barriers comes back. Like for example, for crashworthiness requirement, the rule is very general. You go into the AMC and you will find the barrier for the weight. So you have 700 up to 750 kilos and stall speed of 45 knots. You don't apply certain kinds of requirements. Over that weight and over that speed, you have other kinds of requirements. So you see that weight is again a barrier or let's say a criteria in the applicability of certain kind of, in this case, means of compliance, no more requirement. The document that is going to be published as AMC will contain, of course, an introduction, and it will start with the explanation of one of the new rule, which is the CS23 2010. It's named Acceptable Means of Compliance, and we start with an AMC to this paragraph, explaining what is this document. So the AMC document is illustrating means to show compliance to the requirements, but not the only means. This is important to stress because we have a set of means of compliance, but everybody can, the applicant can come up with their own proposal, and this can be discussed and eventually accepted. And then explains that if you are going to, if the applicant is going to apply a means of compliance which is already established and agreed, so published AMC, the process will be faster. There will be no discussion in the acceptance of the means of compliance. It's already there. You use it. This phase is faster. While if you are going to use something different, there would be the need to agree to it, and this could go, of course, longer. But we expect this, especially at the beginning, because the available means of compliance, originally, they are not covering all the possible technologies and application of this technology to the design. So we expect anyway proposal of different means of compliance, at least at the beginning. Yeah, and then the third bullet actually explained this. So this AMC, when it's used, when the scope is a little bit different from what is already included in it, needs to be reviewed. So cannot be accepted automatically. We have identified three sets of AMC, and we named AMC number 1, 2, and 3. The first one is the consensus standards. So it's a set of consensus standards. At this point, only ASTM standards have been developed as AMC. So we have a set of ASTM standards. And the AMC document will list all these standards with their specific revision. It's important to have this because we could accept a specific revision while we could not accept another one. And then there will be also very important a cross-reference table between the rule, so the CS23 paragraph, and the available and the acceptable standards used as means of compliance to that rule. The building block flexibility will be explained and proposed. It could be that the standards cover a scope, a wider scope with respect to the objective requirement, for example. So you, as an applicant, may want to apply just partially the standard for the part that it's interesting to you and not the entire one. And this is possible, so you can pick up part of standards from one or the other. And it is possible, and it has to be agreed with us in the certification program phase. So we provide certain flexibility. There are cases where the standard is, let's say, not fully accepted. So it could be that there will be an example later on identification of deviation from the standards, and this will be reflected in the AMC document, so you will see it. When we have this rule of the CS23 and corresponding ASTM standard accepted as means of compliance without any remark, then that standard is fully accepted. If there's a deviation, it will be explained, it will be marked, so you will know it. The top level specification is an ASTM, so we are staying still with AMC number 1, the ASTM standards. This document is another ASTM standard, which is kind of summaries of all the ASTM standards that have been proposed by the F44 committee as means of compliance to CS23 in this case, but also to FAR23. And you see, they propose this list of standards as means of compliance, but the authorities, CAAs, so it's very general, FAA and EASA in this case, need to formally accept it. So it's not that when we have a new revision of this top-level specification, it is automatically accepted by us and then you can use it, but we need to have it in our official AMC publication. So there's a formal step to be performed. Just a quick look at how the top-level specification looks like. And I wanted to show the correspondence between the title of the ASTM specification and the title of the paragraph of the CS23. So you will see a direct link already in the top-level specification. The titles sometimes differ a little bit because they need to cover both requirements from FAA and from EASA. So for example, the first one is the weight and mass and center of gravity, because we have mass, FAA as weight in their title. So this is anyway something we are going to repeat in our AMC. So we are going to provide another table which does the same thing, but it's more direct. You see in the next slide how the first table, so the table for the first AMC will look like. So you have on the left column you have the CS23 requirements, and in the middle column you have the applicable ASTM standard that is accepted as means of compliance to the rule. But we keep the reference to the top-level specification and to its issue number and to the paragraph of the top-level specification. It's our intention to keep the link between the two documents. In the remarks column, we are going to highlight the differences, the deviations, any exceptions, or maybe supplementary information when the standard is not covering the full thing. We are going also to provide an hyperlink, so you can use the document in an interactive way. So clicking on the hyperlink, you can get to the page of the standards, and then you can put your login parameters, and then you can get the standards. Let's skip to AMC number 2, which is the old CS23 Amendment 4, which has been kept as a means of compliance for convenience for applicant using existing certification basis. And there will be a table anyway, also in this case, providing a link between the new requirements and the old CS23 paragraph. So this is very useful for design changes, STCs, using the old certification basis, and then now you have to use the new one, so you know the correspondence between the two requirements. The applicability of this AMC number 2 is of course the same applicability of the old CS23 Amendment 4. So it's for aircraft up to 8 tons and 600 kilos and up to 19 or less passengers. So you can make reference to the applicability of that, the old requirement for this AMC. Another important information is the possible usage of existing special conditions and even ELOs that have been developed to cover gaps that were existing before in the old CS23. These special conditions are there and can be still used as complementary in means of compliance to the requirement. So, for example, so you are using CS23 Amendment 4 as means of compliance. You can complement this by using a special condition for lithium battery, for example. The special condition is there. You can still use it as means of compliance to the new requirement. The third AMC, similar discussion as the preceding one, is the old CSVLA, so CSVLA Amendment 1. Again, a table will be provided linking the new requirements to the old CSVLA, and the applicability explanation is making reference to the applicability of the CSVLA, so 750 kilos, 2-seat, the VFR. And again, special conditions developed for VLA code are still applicable as additional, as complementary means of compliance. For example, you have 750 kilos maximum takeoff mass aircraft, and you want to certify it with the new code. You can apply the VLA, the old VLA code as means of compliance, but you want to have IFR with the VLA. So it was possible before through a special condition. It will still be possible now. So your set of means of compliance would be CSVLA Amendment 1 plus the special condition for IFR. The content of the special condition, it will not be a special condition anymore, but will be just a means of compliance. So the technical content of the special condition will be used to show compliance to the new requirement. And that's how the table, the cross-reference table will look like. So again, on the far left, the paragraph of the new requirement, and the second column is are the set of CS23 Amendment 4 paragraphs, which are accepted as means of compliance to the new requirement. Then there's a remarks column, because also in this case we can identify some deviation. We'll see some example later. And additional information like the inclusion of the appendix of one of the appendix of the CS23, like Appendix A, for example, for the simplified load criteria. And then the last two columns do the same thing, but for the AMC number 3, so the VLA. Some items of interest, so the deviation we were talking about before. Paragraph 23.21.50, it's a change. So we said that the CS23, the new one, is just a reorganization. So things are moved somewhere else. You have the general requirement now, and then you have the detailed means of compliance. But actually there are maybe, a couple of important change to increase also safety, because the other intention was to increase safety. So this paragraph is thought to increase the safety for that area of interest, so low speed characteristics. Therefore, if you are going to use VLA or 23 Amendment 4 as means of compliance to this paragraph, it will not be enough. Needs to be supplemented by additional information, and the ASTM standards for low speed characteristics actually provides at the moment the full picture. So you will have the means of compliance. The means of compliance is there. It will be highlighted that using AMC number 2 and 3, it will not be sufficient. So this is important information. And then paragraph 2205. This paragraph was not existing in CS23, and of course neither in CSVLA. It is existing in CS25. It's the paragraph 302 in 25. It's interaction with systems and structures. This is, it was required to include this paragraph due to new incoming technologies where you have, or even old technology which are now used also in small airplanes like fly-by-wire, for example. So this is actually there and needs to be shown compliant, but for conventional aircraft it is normally not applicable. If you have systems influencing loads, then you need to apply this paragraph, and the AMC is not yet available. So this is a gap we are going to cover. It will not be covered in the first issuance of the AMC. Will be covered later on, but doesn't mean that you cannot use it. The AMC can be discussed at project level. So this is always possible. If there's nothing available in the published AMC, we can always discuss this at project level. The idea is to, just to give you another information, the idea is to adapt the existing Appendix K of CS25, which gives let's say, the means of compliance to this paragraph, to adapt it to CS23 level. So we don't want to use those criteria. Those are a little bit too demanding for small airplanes. So there's work in progress to adapt that at Appendix K and have it as means of compliance to this CS23 paragraph. There are, so the first set of standards was derived by translating, so transposing all the requirements in the old CSVLA and CS23 into those standards. But we might have forgot something. So we have identified some requirements of the old CS23 and even VLA which are not covered by ASTM standards, and this will be reflected in the AMC. So it will be highlighted. The review is still ongoing. We have identified some paragraph. FAA also has identified other paragraphs, so we are comparing this and coming up with a final review. So what we will do in this case, for example, the 659, it's a requirement for the supporting structure of mass balance in control surfaces. This is not covered in the ASTM standard. So when we are going to point to the design and loads ASTM standard as means of compliance to the paragraph related, in this case, a component loading condition, we are going to highlight the fact that you need to supplement this standard with the information contained in the CS23 Amendment 4, paragraph number 659. So we will make reference to the old CS23 in this case. The same will happen with the other paragraph. For the amphibian requirements, so this set of requirements related to amphibian aircraft, these were not included in the standards. We could assume there was a reason behind it, because maybe a dedicated standard will be then delivered. It's really design specific, so a dedicated standard could be then developed. At the moment, if you are going to design an amphibian aircraft using the new CS23, we have no, of course, there will be a discussion on the acceptable means of compliance, but if you are going to use the existing paragraph of the old CS23, this is accepted. And then deviation from consensus standard, which is a little bit different from missing elements. In this case, we have, this is an example. The standard makes reference to a flight control system. And the paragraph of the old CS23, it's about protection from loss of control of the aircraft following a failure of an element in the primary flight control system. This paragraph is in the old CS23, is not in the VLA. So for VLA airplanes, it's not applicable. It is applicable for the old CS23 airplane scope. The standard actually exclude the entire level 1 from the applicability of this paragraph, which is a bit more than the VLA. level 1 are airplanes with maximum 1 passenger. But you may have a level 1 which have a stall speed of 50 knots, for example, or 55 knots. And this is out of the scope of the VLA. And if you apply that standard and you are designing a level 1 aircraft with 50 knots of stall speed, then you are exempted from the requirement, and we don't want this. We don't want to change the safety level that was achieved. So we are going to highlight the deviation. So we say this standard is accepted as means of compliance to the flight control system requirement, with the exception of level 1 aircraft with the stall speed higher than 45 knots, where you need to apply the paragraphs 23.677b1 in this case, so as a complementary in means of compliance. And finally, how the compliance checklist layout could be. Nothing special. We don't want to change too much. We don't need to change that much, but we need additional information in the mock list. The first 2 columns are the requirements. In this case, it's the Amendment 5 of CS23. But then we need additional columns to identify the chosen means of compliance. Could be a standard, could be the old CS23 or the old VLA, but needs to be identified in here, and also the section of the AMC. This is part of the discussion on the agreement of the means of compliance. It's actually showing compliance to one of the paragraphs of the CS23, the 2010. I have, for example, stricken through some section of the, in this case, the ASTM standard, because it could be useful to highlight the fact that the section of the standard was considered, but some paragraphs are not applicable to your design. And then you just say, okay, you're not simply not naming them, but you can name them and then strike through and explain the reason why they are not applicable. And then I proposed also another column, which is identified as method or additional specification, where you can, for example, identify means of compliance on a second level. So those are normally test method or standard practices that are available as documents, so you could identify them in here. So, for example, there's this standard for systems and equipment. It has a general definition of AMC, but then you can go more in details by using another standard, which is not a specification, but is a standard practice for safety assessment. So, for example, the old 1309, now it's called 2510, if I'm not wrong. And then you have, so, CS23, 2510, means of compliance, ASTM standard, it's F3061, it's the system requirement. And then you can identify in the method column that you are going to use this standard practice for the safety assessment, for the actual implementation of the assessment. It's additional information that can be useful. And if you are going to use, for example, CS23 Amendment 4 as means of compliance, then you can identify in that column a related advisory circular from FAA, for example. Again, back to the example of the 1309, you will identify here AC 23-1309-E, for example. This could be an idea. Okay, so I think that's all. Yeah, so if you have a question.
Thanks, Pasquale. We received quite a number of questions, mainly related to LOI, strange enough. We have still a few questions which were related more or less to what you proposed. And the first one is it planned to implement the airworthiness levels principle into CS27 too? I think you want to answer on that, Michael.
Not sure I understand the question correctly. Is the question whether the same idea, objective-based certification specification, is also being implemented into CS27? Yes, okay. Our colleagues from the FAA had started that discussion. They had made a proposal for, in our world, CSVLR and CS27 under the title Safety Continuum. And we started to discuss with them end of last year to also have this, as we did for CS23, to have this as a cooperation approach, that we do it together on both sides of the Atlantic. So we started that discussion, but the FAA colleagues had stopped at least the discussion, the idea of implementing that into the rules, because they have some difficulties at the moment to propose new rules. So they have changed a little bit the approach and implemented the idea in the ACs, so in the at the level of the guidance material. And we are now discussing with them whether we follow the same approach or whether we continue with the idea of having the same objective-based certification specifications in our CS. But the discussion is ongoing, yes.
Okay, with that and looking at the time, we started 20 minutes late and you more or less kept it to that. I would switch to the next topic. We will keep all the questions and we will try to answer them at a later stage. Maybe we can use the closing session today to answer some more questions. But then I would like to hand over to Olivier Tribout to explain to you a little bit more on SEPIAC and what it's all about.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Olivier Tribout. I'm DOA team leader, and I will be talking about SEPIAC. Now, I will sacrifice my presentation to catch up for time. I hope you appreciate the devotion. So I will try to keep it to 10 minutes. Thank you. I appreciate it. Obviously, I have a few slides. However, before entering into this, just very briefly, what is the problem that we are trying to solve with SEPIAC? There is a number, but basically, it's emails. We just all receive too many emails. Easy, you know that already. The other thing is that in these emails, we just never know if we have to do something or if it's just for information, and quite often we have to do something, but it's hidden somewhere in the email. Second issue, which is linked to the email, is the commenting. So what we do mainly is we work on documents, and on these documents we need to comment. We don't agree, we agree, something is missing, and so on and so forth. But what happens very often is that these documents are reviewed by many people, and all these people will usually save a copy on their laptop with their name at the end, underscore my name. They will put the comment into the document and they will send it back. Now, the guy on the other side will have then to collect all the feedback received in many and various documents and make a summary out of that to know what they have to change in the documents. And this is just a nightmare. The other thing, and this is the third issue, is overview on the planning for the project. How do I manage my project? How do I know that this document is now endorsed and this one is not? Of course, we have a workaround. Obviously, the system works today. It means basically that you, as project manager, you have probably an Excel list where you try to keep all the documents that you have submitted to the agency. Or, and the same for your experts. So already in your company, there is a duplication. Maybe you have a database. Good for you. Then on our side, at EASA, the PCM will quite often have also an Excel list where he will put all your documents and track the status. The issue is that the experts also at EASA will probably do the same. So we already have like 4 Excel files or database or flags in Outlook and so on to manage the status of the document and the status of the project as a whole. So SEPIAC is meant to address this. And we have now SEPIAC Release 1, which is the, so to speak, the basis, a solid basis on which we can build to actually cater for the issue I just mentioned. So, if I now go for my presentation. So SEPIAC is about a new way of exchanging during a certification project. And it's about moving from email avalanche to a one single central platform. This is part of a broader initiative from the agency, which is called Coral, which aims to ensuring digital continuity in our processes at EASA. So SEPIAC is just one building block of a broader view which is managed by Coral. And what I just mentioned is that SEPIAC will bring visibility to what is the status of this document, what is the status of my project, and who is doing what. So who is in action right now as we speak? Is it me? Is it you? So now a bit of technical data, and this is, I think it will answer any question you may have, I hope. So very briefly, SEPIAC is based on SharePoint 2016. So if you know SharePoint, if you use it in your company, that would be a breeze, you will feel at home. The beauty of SEPIAC is that it's accessible for, by you, obviously, by EASA, but also by the NAAs and third country authority. So again, when we talk about reviewing documents and having several versions of the same documents, then SEPIAC will solve this issue. Because if we have a team member in the NAA, he will have the same access as someone from EASA. A few words on the security, which is, of course, worries on your side. This SEPIAC is a cloud-based platform, but it's not like iCloud or Google Cloud or whatever. It's a dedicated cloud for EU agencies, meaning that it's a dedicated hardware, dedicated software, hosted in a dedicated location. I put a number of things here, but the main one is that it is hosted in Germany. Confidentiality. Again, there is a bit of obvious stuff in there, but obviously EASA has access to everything. On the other hand, you as an applicant, you have access only to your projects. For NAAs, they got access only if they are involved in this project as PCM or as experts. And for third country authority, it's even more restricted because they get access only to the projects where we give access, but also only to the documents we want them to see. Now, access to the platform, and it's still time to put that on your wish list for Christmas. You need to send an email to sepiac-help at easa.europa.eu, and then we will create an admin account for your company. It means that we will not manage all your users because that would be just too much. So we create one account for you, could be more, but one or more admin accounts, and then these accounts are responsible to create further users within your company. Now, regarding training and communication, SEPIAC obviously impacts a lot of users and players. So when it comes to internal users, it's easy because we control them at EASA. So we have set up a number of trainings. By the way, we are roughly 50%. So 50% of EASA staff in certification are now trained, but it means that 50 are not. We will also organize some roadshows, meaning that we will go, and there is only one, there is one already planned, in the UK. So we will go to some places, and we will gather then all applicants from this country or from around, so that we can deliver a training. It will be like 3-4 hours. Deliver a training for you to get used to the platform. It's obviously a new tool, so you need a bit of time to get used to it. We have already one plan in the UK in February. There will be more. And we are liaising with our LOI colleagues to try maybe to combine those so that you would get like in the morning LOI and in the afternoon SEPIAC or vice versa. In case you have issues, you can also find still the same email address, and you can also find on the platform some guidance and training materials. This you can use to train your own people. This is how it looks like, but the best way is just to log in on the platform. And also regarding the planning, I just want to mention that we have release 1 now. Now we are about to roll out the release 2 that will bring additional features, and there is also a release 3 which is planned next year, middle of next year, that will bring again additional functionalities. Now, for you, what is important to know is that we would like to have first quarter next year to have all STCs, major changes and major repairs, handled through SEPIAC. And that's it.
Thanks, Olivier. You saved a lot of time, even though it was very entertaining. I think the most entertaining and best performance today so far. We got a number of questions on the subject, not on LOI, which is good. One is whether SEPIAC is also intended for DOA, like the significant changes to DOAs, changes to the procedures, the templates, etc.
I'm sure that the one who asked the question knows the answer. However, okay, all right. Yeah, in case of, yeah. For this topic, this is still under review by EASA. So we have a number of initiatives at EASA. I mentioned the Coral program. So Coral is, as I said, a program covering many initiatives to make EASA more digital and more integrated. So, you know, from beginning to end, it will, for example, it will look like at the connection between the applicant portal and SEPIAC. And so we have a number of initiatives, and one is looking at organization approvals, like POA, MOA, and so on. So it could be logical that we manage the DOA part within this tool, because then we have a logic, all approvals are managed within one tool, and we can apply SMS. On the other hand, it could be logic to have the DOAs managed on SEPIAC, because it means that there is one interface for you guys. It's always the same. Whether it's a product certification or a DOA change, it's exactly the same. So there are pros and cons. There are logical bits for the two scenarios. We need a decision at some point, and I don't know yet.
But in this respect, I think support from industry in one way or the other would be quite helpful. I mean, in the end, we all have to work together. And if we have one simple system connecting both elements, I think that would be best. We had one more practical question, because you said working together on the same document. How many simultaneous accesses are allowed for the same document?
When it comes to read-only, then obviously it's unlimited. You can be as many as you want. When it comes to edition, if it's a Word document, you can be, again, as many as you want. So this is a very interesting feature. So there is concurrent editing on SEPIAC. So you can open the same Word document, 5, 10, 100 users, and edit the document at the same time. But this works only for Word. When it comes to, as I said, read-only is as many as you want. For the rest, of course, if you open the document for edition, it is locked for this user, and it means that the other users have to wait.
Thanks, Olivier, for the presentation and for answering the questions. We have one more topic before the coffee break. It's about continued airworthiness and the occurrence reporting. And I would like to ask our colleague, Igers Christins, to guide us through the presentation.
Sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Igers Christins. I'm a Senior Occurrence Reporting Officer and Project Certification Manager. So let's move to the topic, to the different topic, which is part of the continued airworthiness, occurrence reporting. So in my presentation, I'm about to actually cover briefly the reminder on the requirements in the field. And also we will look at some experiences which we have gained from the processing of occurrences, and then also some few words about what comes next. What is the overall objective of the occurrence reporting? I think all of us in the field know that it is, of course, to prevent accidents from occurring. And this we achieve, by collecting, analyzing, and actually proposing corrective actions on the, let's say, areas with higher risk. With the Regulation 376, which came into, let's say, force as of November 15, 2015, there were some additional aspects added which provided this, this activity can be even, let's say, improved by the exchange of information, by appropriate reporting format and data quality, which was not the case before, so we can exchange information between authorities, between industry and authorities. Data dissemination and protection rules are made very clear. And in addition, we have also the European Risk Classification Scheme, which will be mainly used by the aviation authorities, and just culture aspects, which of course are very important in order to facilitate the occurrence reporting. So if we move on, of course, this is a brief reminder on what the requirements are. Of course, Part 21 says, okay, that what has to be reported is the, let's say, failures, defects, and so on, which might or have resulted in unsafe condition. Something similar you can find also in the Regulation 376, so there is no, not a big change on that, so it's very consistent. As a principle, as you see that we have all these both regulations, meaning EASA basic regulation and 376 applicable to the same area, it needs to be understood that it is understood that both regulations are complementary and both apply, but from the organization's point of view, there is expectation that only one occurrence reporting system is established within the organization, which meets all these, let's say, requirements from both regulations. So that, yeah, that one I will skip now. I think that slide you have seen most probably also from the guidance material for the 376. I will not repeat it now, but I will go straight to the point, which is, let's say, regarding the follow-ups. We know that in Regulation 376 it is more formalized the way how, let's say, the follow-up should be provided, when and what should be included in those. But nevertheless, of course, it's still subject to, or seen as subject to interpretation. So at EASA we decided to come up with the, let's say, guidance material, which would provide the explanation what the expectations are. So to explain this, I will use this flow chart. So the question is always, is unsafe or potential unsafe condition identified? And then depending on that, you will provide initial, follow-up, or close-out reports. So if the answer to this question is no, simply the organization can take time, can work on the occurrence, can do the full assessment in order to come up with the conclusions, and actually to report occurrence to the authority at the later point of time when this occurrence is closed at your end and full investigation has been done, and you see all the analysis, corrective actions, and so on. The next option is that you still don't have an unsafe condition, but initial report, for whatever reason, was already sent to the authority. And the third answer is yes. So what happens with the follow-up and closure reports for those? So for the first case, there is no need to provide a follow-up report because you still haven't reported anything, so you will report it once it is closed and so on. For the next one, you already provided the initial report, but still you haven't confirmed that there is an unsafe condition or potential unsafe condition. So therefore, there is also no need to provide the follow-up report at that stage. However, for the third case, you have a pretty prescriptive, let's say, requirement that within 30 days you need to provide your, let's say, conclusions or a risk assessment result at that point. Don't be afraid if you haven't finished that entirely, just provide as is, let's say, situation at that point. So regarding the closeout reports, for the first case, of course, there is still no applicability. For the second case, when you actually sent already the report, but in the end you identified that it is still not the unsafe condition, of course, a closure report would be then expected, which then clearly states, okay, there is no unsafe condition, and that would be that. For the third case, where you have the answer yes, then of course, as soon as practicable, but according to regulation, in principle, yeah, within 3 months after the initial reporting, but that is not a binding rule. You can take longer. The closeout report needs to be provided. And what we read here is that, of course, you need to take appropriate time to assess, establish, you know, the corrective actions. I don't know, to take time for the certification changes and so on, or issue SIBs, depending on the case. And then, of course, you will report your closeout report once it is, let's say, finalized. And yeah, and what we do expect, you know, in these follow-up and closeout reports, this will be like a short checklist, you know, of information expected for the follow-up or final, and it should provide actually the latest or final TC holder position, whether there is unsafe condition or not, or potential unsafe condition. The initial or final investigation results would be expected, and also the containment or corrective and preventive actions on that case. Of course, the risk assessment should support that, and show that preventive actions which were done are actually satisfactory and provide a safe operation of the product in the future, according to the guidance listed here, and also applicable DOA procedures. So, with the next 2 slides, I would like just to remind quickly, you know, give a bit bigger picture to your community where we stand with the current reporting in the EU system. The first slide is about the, let's say, EU system from the organization's perspective, and I think it should be very clear and understood that the most important thing is that information is shared between organizations who are the frontliners, who can work actually on the first instance on occurrences and propose corrective actions and ensure that product safety. So if you take an example that, for example, maintenance station finds during the, let's say, C-check a crack somewhere in the horizontal stabilizer, which exceeds, for example, which is a pretty big, let's say, a bigger one, then of course it will report that to the operator and also the design organization. The operator also will report this to the design organization. So it means that the design organization receives this information, can assess it, can screen it, and can act accordingly. For the this slide is showing actually the authorities' perspective. Yeah? On the left and right side you have industry, and in the middle you have this tool in order to provide occurrences to the authorities, which is this portal, centralized portal, which is used in order to report, let's say, reports to the competent authorities. And of course, in addition, our top reporting organizations who provide, let's say, exports from their databases by using the specific file format E5X is also meant here. So behind the scenes, you can see that you have EASA. On top, you have member states and their authorities on the bottom part. In the middle, you have this central repository where actually all the occurrences from the Europe land. So, who is reporting to the agency? I will go quickly here because I think most of you know these aspects. Of course, design organizations, EASA-approved production organizations, foreign maintenance organizations report to the agency. And who reports to the, let's say, member states are the mainly EU production maintenance operators who were approved by the competent authorities there. According to Article 15 and of the basic regulation and also the implementing rules, There is actually the network of information between EASA and NAA, so we exchange safety significant information as needed, where actually the authority or EASA has the competency to look at and work. And the same is also for safety investigation authorities, that we receive also the notifications on accidents and also the final reports afterwards. What happens next is that national aviation authorities provide their data into the European Central Repository, and also the agency provides its data, integrates into this European Central Repository. So it means that there is a single big, let's say, database where all the occurrences are put in, and then in the future will be used, for example, by data for safety analysis and other tools which are actually on the way in the agency's projects to be established. So what comes out from the work from the agency? Of course, the first feedback you get normally is from the teams with which you work on a daily basis. It's PCMs, experts. When you look at the occurrences during the continued airworthiness process. The most visible part is, of course, airworthiness directives and SIBs, which are then issued by the agency. Involvement of other authorities, whenever these, as mentioned, this network of information. Designer rule holders can also request actually and receive information on occurrences which happened on their or occurred on their products. That's an option as well. And then of course the next steps, which are the work of the European Network of Aviation Safety Analysts, as formalized by the Regulation 376 as well, and the famous document on the European Plan for Aviation Safety, EPAS. So with that, I would like to finish the part on the regulations, and the next the steps would be on the some feedback, which we have got from the let's say work with the occurrences. So the first one is on the unsafe, let's say potential unsafe conditions. We have observed that actually many DOAs tend to think that only once the unsafe condition is confirmed, then I have to report this occurrence to the agency. But indeed, it is not the spirit actually of the Part 21 A3A and also the 737. So basically, EASA needs to be reported also the potential unsafe conditions as soon as they are known or identified. As the best practice, we would say that, okay, this identification shouldn't take longer than 1 week. So in 1 week you should make your mind up if it's unsafe, potential unsafe or not. If not possible, if in doubt, then better report, because at the later stage you can provide follow-up report and say and downgrade this occurrence. So yeah, according to the regulation, it's 72 hours after this identification. You would like to see that we receive this information from you, because if we receive information timely, we can also work timely with you on the occurrences, on the mitigating actions, and avoid, let's say, some last-minute work. So 72 hours, it's of course what we find in the regulations, but of course it shouldn't be always considered as the maximum. Of course, if you can provide information earlier it's better, especially for the high visibility, let's say, occurrences. So it means that that EASA learns timely about this, and we can respond also to Commission's requests, NAA's requests, and media and so on as needed. Because if we are not informed, or if we don't have this information at hand, it is not easily understood by other parties. Another point is where we would like to invite actually to get actually your understanding that we might seek and actually seek the EASA, the manufacturers actually the support in assessing actually occurrences or the impact on airworthiness in the case of, for example, if there's a maintenance issue, or if it's, let's say, an SUP, suspected unapproved parts case, because only you are in the best position to assess how severe this is on at the aircraft level, and how, let's say, promptly the corrective action should be implemented. So some other aspects on the, let's say, data exchange. I would like just to mention some recommended fields and information which we would like to expect from your, according to the follow-up provision which I mentioned earlier. So it is, let's say, like analysis, follow-up, corrective actions, conclusions, risk assessment. This is mainly for the, let's say, top reporting organizations to include those in the let's say, export files. But also when you use the form online that you fill this information out. And because this is very useful, as well like tracking sheet number, if you are using in your organization Airworthiness review sheet or action sheet, carry process, then it's nice that we can see also this link in the occurrence, and because at the agency level also the PCMs tend to work more at the safety specific issues, let's say, level than on single occurrences. So if it is the same unsafe condition, of course you can group those. Regarding the other aspects, for top reporting organizations, providing E5X files with attachments and so on, easily you could exceed, let's say, 10 megabytes. This is actually, unfortunately, the limitation of the email. So therefore, actually, we have put in place a solution, EASA FTP, which can be established like a dual link between EASA and the organization, and it's entirely, let's say, encrypted and protected. So it's WinSCP can be used as one of the, let's say, applications to access it. So in case, just consult or contact IORS team, and we can provide this to you. Regarding make model series, we know that in the past this list was pretty, let's say, obsolete, so it is now updated, so you can most probably will be able to find the products which you didn't find in the past when reported occurrences to us. Meaning of values, here I would like to say that for top reporting organizations, this information on the definition of the, let's say, value is available in the XML, let's say, schema. However, we need to work still also on our end, that also on the online forms you have the definitions of the values, because that helps sometimes also to select the most appropriate one. And of course the use of default values. So regarding the next steps, regarding the NPA 2016-19, which is about to align actually basic regulation and its implementing rules with 376, it's ongoing. NPA process was, let's say, ended, and now the work is ongoing on the opinion, and it is planned for the Q1 of 2018 to that opinion should be finalized. Regarding the implementation of all this NPA, apparently there will be no one-off implementation to all the rules. It will be actually to catch the train of different amendments of different, let's say, applicable rules. For E5X schema, we just would like to inform that it was, let's say, recently updated and can be used. It's not, we are not requesting its immediate use, because our system will be still backwards compatible. It is for top reporting organizations who are reporting the E5X files, and from the portal, the forms will be updated by the end of the year. So next year we will be able also to receive the new taxonomy, let's say, fields. Also the make model series of the aircraft, which you will see as the beginning of the next year in these forms. There's ongoing work on mandatory fields review to make them more meaningful. This was identified in IORS workshops, and also in some other feedback from the industry, and also from authorities as well, and the EASA itself. European Risk Classification Scheme, it was developed in 2017, but still needs to be adopted. And I think in 2018 it should come in place, but it is not affecting organizations directly, because that is for the authorities, mainly to be used by authorities. But on voluntary basis, of course, also organizations might decide to use this scheme if seen as applicable, and that's it. So more information is actually here on EASA website. We try to keep it up to date. Also, the guidance on the follow-ups is to be found on this website. It is attached there, and on daily basis, if you don't find answers on this website, please feel free to contact also IORS team, and we will try to help you on your questions. So thank you. Yeah, there will be some list of documents. Otherwise, thank you if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Aigas. We received a number of questions, some for clarification. For example, is the regulation 376 applicable to non-EU DOAs?
Regarding the organizations, 376 is applicable to the organizations established in the member state. So it means that you would say that directly no. Yes.
Okay. An interesting one, are follow-up and final report mandatory when no answer is received from authority following initial report of an occurrence? Nice question.
Yeah,
but I don't think you will receive some kind of response from us.
Yeah, normally we provide acknowledgement of all the provided information. Especially if you use the portal, you receive immediately actually the let's say automatic acknowledgement, where you have also, if you use the offline form, you receive the PDF to be used for the updates, or if you file the occurrence via online form, also you receive the E5Y file, which then you can use for the updates, because then you don't need to refill all the previously, let's say, filled information. So basically, there should be initial feedback received on. But if there is a case, we need to look at. I don't know.
One more question for clarification was the term aircraft manufacturer. Who is this? The POA, the TC holder, or all certificate holders? Maybe just for clarification, when you say aircraft manufacturer, whom you address with this?
Sorry?
The term, when you mentioned aircraft manufacturer,
yeah.
Who is it? Is it the POA, the TC holder? Who is that?
No, here in this, I was meaning actually design organization, design approval holder. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Aigas.
Sorry, I have a question.
Yes.
Kostkimber from Südwest Support Services.
Yeah.
Is there any plan to update the IORS? Because the current situation, you may receive doubled or tripled reports for one single event. For example, if the MO identifies with your proposal the horizontal stabilizer a crack, then they will report. Maybe the operator and the DOA will report. So 3 reports for one single event. Is there?
Yes, actually, we don't see it as a disadvantage. Actually, we see it as if somebody, for example, fails to report, at least we receive information from the other. And also you might have different authorities involved, so that also they are, let's say, learning about the occurrence. Of course, they will execute their activities in the domain where they are having the competency. The same for EASA. And it is like also a safeguard, because if we start excluding some of these lines, we can easily open another problem, just to how we then ensure that the reporting was properly done by others, and if it was missed somewhere and so on. There are unnecessary maybe discussions open immediately.
Don't understand me wrong. Sure, all of them have to report, but is there a possibility to combine the reports so that you have one single event reporting which can be filled out by separate parties?
Yes, but how practically we would then see that? It's of course the matter of time. Most probably the frontliner encountering occurrence will be the first one. Design organization might not be the first one learning about it at the first instance. So that could be one of the aspects which comes to my mind now. And yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, but thanks for your point.
Maybe one additional point here. You know that we are working on developing a new tool to replace IORS, SDM, and SDM is under development right now. So your point, we take it on board. It is part of many discussions we are having today, the application, the redundancy, or the loss of occurrences, and the interactive aspect also of this software. So we take your point. I have to support the statement that sometimes for us it is better having redundancy than missing the information with the system, the tools we have today. I have to say sometimes we are complaining about its efficiency. It is heavy. We agree. So let's see what we can do in SDM. We take your point. It is already, I know, on this SDM business analysis working plan. What will we come up with? I think maybe, not maybe, for sure next year at this workshop, we may report on SDM because we should have a much better visibility on what does it mean. So thanks for the point, and we will develop further the reply to this question into the offline replies.
Okay, one more question from the floor over here, and then we break for coffee.
Okay. When EASA received two different reports coming from two different entities and they having two different classification, one unsafe and the other one not unsafe, how EASA manage this kind of situation?
There's only one record per occurrence.
You know that the 376 law and Part 21 has different as samples, so give two different baseline to select unsafe conditions.
Yes, that's the way it is. We have one record per occurrence, means that we always retain all the original reports received. They are part of this record, and so it means that if it's like maintenance organization and design organization, that for design organization it might be this, let's say, unsafe condition, but not necessarily for the maintenance organization. It just found that there is a, let's say, failure somewhere, and of course then you have also the involvement of, let's say, in the assessment of these occurrences accordingly. So you will have PCM for the design aspects, you would have actually the maintenance organization team leader for the maintenance organization's aspects if there are any to be looked at. Normally it's just found. So there's no issue. It's one important task of the system to, let's say, to find duplicates and to join them into one record, and there's one record, and you have a different perspective on one occurrence. So.
Okay, thanks very much. Unfortunately, we didn't manage to speed up and catch up with the delay. The coffee break now, if you could really come back within 20 minutes from now to start with the last afternoon session. Thank you.